But I just wanted to show this early digital sketch from us. This was 1995, 96 or 7, where we had actually tried to produce a digital sketch, tried to get rid of the pencil altogether, get rid of the conventional tools of drawing, and see, in fact, if we could produce a poetic, metaphysical, somewhat enigmatic, and perhaps meaningful set of drawings through digital technologies using animation software, the software that Paul had referred to, Maya on the fun side, and other programs. That had led to a body of work which has tried to find a way to interface, let's say, the cold, artificial, and somewhat austere nature of the technological object with the human condition, the human dimension, the dimension of thinking, the dimension of cultures, of thought. And we produced these drawings called M-scapes a few years ago that were, in fact, a hybridization using automotive design software and aeronautic design software with good old-fashioned collage technique and drawing to produce bodies that lingered somewhere between the technological and the humanistic body. Just quickly, in terms of some of the theoretical work, this is a study we had done for Venice for the Biennale, where we had taken these artificial bodies, these hybrid bodies, these architectural monsters, if you will, and put them into a space, into a kind of space of inhabitation, what they could become like theoretically as large-scale buildings or aspects of the landscape, what it means to produce a kind of poetic urbanism or poetic space. And this has its lineage way back to, we saw a fantastic lecture this morning on Buckminster Fuller, and also part of that equation is Paolo Solari, the whole let's say, movement that came out of that. And so these idea of megastructures, self-contained cities, and so on was something we started to just think about and put into this installation the idea, and these are the computer simulations of it, the ideas of a kind of Willy Loman character, sort of lost modern man or hyper-modern man, sort of wandering around these vacuous environments looking for meaning. What we actually built in Venice was an installation that I had labeled somewhat flippantly as a kind of architectural wind tunnel. I wanted to find a way, I thought it would be interesting to produce an environment in which we as architects use what kind of environment do we use as architects to look at the resonances of flux, of change, of modulation, of musicality, of rhythm, of the various things that we as architects think about and do and are the only experts in, unlike, say, structural engineers or other kinds of expertise. Our expertise is very particular to these somewhat, seemingly at times, esoteric dimensions and structures, and we need to find a way, I think, to express that. And historically, we have through drawing, modeling, sculpture, painting, even performance with the Bauhaus and others. So this was a kind of an attempt to produce some kind of environment. If you saw it in Venice, the pieces, these kind of hybrid automotive bodies, technological bodies, sat in this ether of light. As the light changed, these objects changed. And the idea was that you were looking at a real-time first reality experience. This was not a virtual experience. This was not a computer-generated experience. This was not a digital experience per se, although conceived of digitally. But you're watching architecture under a state of constant flux and change according to the realities in the change of light, atmosphere, ambience, and so on. Along the lines of exploring computer software possibilities, let's say, and where I say we're coming of age a little bit with computing is also now the ability to manufacture things using computers. We studied these somewhat benign gold boxes for a company out of London called Mallet, an antique company that asked us to work on artisanal and sort of craft-oriented work, and coming to a digital studio like ours and asking for that was an interesting moment for us to think about. So we produced these liquid boxes made of plated in gold that are actually part of their line of new antiques, I guess. And really what these were for us an attempt to see if we could drive certain formal tendencies, certain aspects of movement, of effect, of sort of geometries into actual physical pieces that would be manufactured. This is the actual box, manufactured box. And the fact that these things, we're not designers, we don't profess to be designers, we're not really that interested in design per se as a kind of production of mass-produced objects or entering the marketplace in that sense. But we are interested in using design as we do art, to explore possibilities for architecture. So the fact that this box could, in its essence, is a mutation or a liquid entity, but it could actually mutate into other formal structures and strategies, was something of interest to us. Similarly with this piece, which is a piece where we attempted to take this craft mentality and allow the computer to become our sort of artisans, in this case a 7-axis milling machine, and certain geometries that we were able to send through a sort of solid piece of material, of metal, of aluminum in this case, and mill it to a form which would create a kind of organic form, something we'd almost find in nature, something windswept, something by the sea, and using faceting and certain obvious geometric maneuvers, we were able to produce this wave-like form. This wave-like form became a table for the same company. And this table, in fact, is milled out of a solid piece, has a piece of bent glass over top of it. And again, not necessarily a table per se, but in the tradition of, and one has to remember, and I have to remind my brother of this once in a while, that architects spawned this notion of design, industrial design, let's say, and furniture design. But from a point of view, if you think back to the early part of the 20th century, of using, whether it's bent metal tubing, whether it was certain materials, whether it was the adherence of color theory into wood structures like Rietveld, using design to experiment with the technologies of the day, the possibilities that are before us. So design becomes a fantastic sort of conduit to experimenting with new thinking, new tools, new ideas, and it's something that's very immediate. It's something of a scale that we can work with, and we can produce these kind of artifacts rapidly and understand certain things. And in that sense, we've been doing these design objects. Similarly, for a lighting company out of Austria, Zumtobel, I was asked to look at doing a chandelier. Again, not really interested in designing a chandelier. I sort of started to think a little bit with my group as to how we could, in fact, attack this idea of a chandelier. A strange story in this was that I was in Budapest actually doing another project, and the car that was driving me to my hotel, I had him stop on Váci Street in Budapest, where there's a very famous chandelier store, and I stood in the window of this chandelier store for about 20 minutes trying to figure out how to design a chandelier, looking at, like you see in these buildings, crystals and light, and the origin of those being in candlelight. And really what it comes down to is a chandelier is something that is about spectral effects. It's about a kind of generation of a metaphysical space around light, a kind of fracturing of light into an environment. And with that frustration with the chandelier store, I really turned around and thought I was going to abandon the project because I couldn't see myself working in those materials. And then I noticed the headlight of the car that was driving me to the hotel, which was an Audi A8. And I kind of stared into the headlight for a few minutes while the driver thought I was out of my mind, and then got in the car and realized that the fragmented and fantastic geometric structure of the headlight design of these new cars is really the key to producing the spectral effects we're looking for, albeit from a less engineered point of view. So this is the chandelier. It's actually made of carbon fiber composite. It uses LED light as opposed to candle light, of course, or incandescent light. And it's been quite interesting for us because it's the effects, again, and the kind of atmosphere that this thing creates that's of real interest to me, and the fact that we could create this hyper-light technological object that would produce this kind of spectral thing by virtue of its concavity and the minimal surface mathematics that was used to actually make it and achieve that. So this, just to move to architecture now, this idea of spectral effects, of sort of performance even, and the way that buildings and light and architecture perform in space, this is Andy Warhol and a kind of moment in art in New York where these chrome pillars are able to float around the room and rechange something. And of course, Anish Kapoor's very famous work in Chicago and other places around the world, that really at the end of the day becomes a kind of let's say more of an induction machine for architecture, something that in fact takes architecture in and reconfigures it and refurbishes it and sends it back out as a kind of cloud-like condition.